A longtime public servant has become a thorn in the side of Mayor Mamdani, then a state assemblyman concerned about the rise of homeless encampments. The Point starts right now. Randy Mastro is a former federal prosecutor who has had high City Hall posts in 2 administrations. Now he's probably the man Mayor Mamdani would least like to have coffee with. And here's how I know. At a recent press conference, he said, "There are few things more certain than death, taxes, and Randy Mastro suing the city." So I do want to talk to you about one of the suits you filed against the city, but I want to talk to you about open primaries.
Of course.
And a suit that you filed in Staten Island that's backed by a lot of people that would force the city to have open primaries so that everybody can vote. Why is that so important?
Well, because too many New Yorkers are left on the sidelines by our partisan primary system.
1.1 million.
That's a huge percentage of the voting population because they registered independents. They just get no say. What we have now is the partisan primary process, where in the Democratic primary, very few people show up, but when whoever comes out of that primary, in this case, it was Zoran Mamdani, they're the presumptive front runner and winner in the general election. So you leave on the sidelines over 1 million New Yorkers who don't even get to vote because unless you're a registered Democrat, you can't vote in that primary. So Mayor Adams wanted that to get on the ballot. He appointed a charter commission. In 2025, it was about to put it on the ballot and at the last minute decided to just do housing initiatives. So then he appointed another commission just as he was leaving office, perfectly legal to do, no question about it. But Zoran Mamdani, when he became mayor, dead of night goes to Albany and gets Albany to stick into the budget a provision that extinguished that commission.
Because why? He didn't want open primaries?
He didn't want open primaries.
Why is he afraid of it?
So you'd have to ask him, and I know you'll have the chance, but I would just say this. When people get elected in a certain system, they tend to want to keep that system. But New York City is out of step. Over 80% of the major cities in this country, 500,000 and above, have open primaries and a 2-person runoff. 80% of those have a 2-person runoff. It is what cities do. You know why? Because there's no Republican or Democrat way to pick up the garbage. That's what our greatest mayor, Fiero LaGuardia, taught us. It's a nonpartisan role. And when you play partisan politics, when you only govern to your base, that's the antithesis of good government at the local level.
So what are the pros and the cons of open primaries?
Okay. The pros are robust participation, and everyone has a say. The pros are you don't have one dominant political party, that whoever comes out of that primary, even if it's a minority of the vote, is the presumptive front runner in the general. The cons are partisan party politics. They like to control their nominees in their process, and in New York City, that has meant Democrats for decades. Now, Marcia, you know, I'm a lifelong Democrat, but I'm also my entire adult life here in New York City. I love this city. I want everybody to participate in our local elections. And unfortunately, too many are left on the sidelines by an anachronism, our party primary process.
But, you know, I've had independents on this show who talk about the same thing. They feel that they're left out of the political process and that they should have a say in picking who the next mayor is.
Yes. Well, of course they should. But why would the Democratic establishment, or even now the Democratic socialists who elected Mamdani, want to change the system?
Are they afraid of losing?
Of course they are, because those independents are much likely to exercise a more balanced, common sense approach to their local government.
So let's talk about your suit. You have Democrats and Republicans supporting you, and there is a group, Unite New York, that has also gotten 45,000 signatures on a petition.
And more to come.
Well, here's the thing. My understanding is that you get 45,000 signatures and you can go to the city council and say, put this on the ballot. Is that a possibility?
Yes. But if they get even more than 45,000 signatures. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but it's not much more. They can get on the ballot automatically. You see, you do follow this. And the fact of the matter is, this issue is going to get on the ballot one way or the other. Mayoral charter commissions, like the one Mondani appointed at the last minute to try and block open primaries from getting on the ballot, all that's going to achieve, all he achieved in the lawsuit when we were swimming uphill against state legislation that he asked for to extinguish us and to block the petition drive, is delaying it until next year. It's going to be on the ballot, and New Yorkers are going to have the right to decide their own electoral future. And that's a good thing for New York.
But so here's my question. So we know that you have to get 45 plus 15 or 60,000 signatures. Would you be able to do that and get it on the ballot this November, or do we have to wait a year?
It's too late for this November. The Mayor's Charter Revision Commission, Mondani's, put propositions on the ballot. That blocks any citizen referendum for a year.
But can't he do the same thing next year?
No, because it can only block it for a year. So it goes on the ballot next year.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then what happens?
Then it's up to the voters to decide. And you know something? What's more democratic than the voters deciding on their own electoral future? So I personally, I'm not involved in that petitioning drive. That's an independent thing. But the fact of the matter is, New Yorkers should get the right to decide whether they want open primaries and more access to electing their local elected officials, and they'll get that next year.
But you also have a suit. You went into
Yes.
court in federal in
Yes.
Staten Island. What does that suit seek to do?
Yeah. Well, the lawsuit is over because unless we had succeeded by early August, it wasn't going to be possible for us to get our open primaries and a two-person runoff on the ballot. The way the law was written to extinguish the Eric Adams Commission was, any city. But the only commission that was extinguished was the Eric Adams one.
I get that. So let's talk about another suit, the ever-popular suit you filed to stop implementation of the pied-à-terre tax, which is very controversial. But the point of your suit is the rollout was botched. Is that not true? Correct.
It's been a complete debacle. And even people in the Mondani administration have admitted they have regrets about the rollout. Fact of the matter is that they rolled out the surcharge in a way that violates the state law that authorized its implementation in the first place.
In what way?
So that law says the Mondani administration has to determine at an initial stage, individualized initial determination whether you're subject to the surcharge. They have to make that determination, and they have to make it based on the information available to them, which the state made very easy because they also gave the Mondani administration access to tax records. Nobody's paying city income taxes who's not a city resident. But the Mondani administration inverted that whole statutory scheme and instead flipped the burden onto thousands and thousands of New York City homeowners to prove they live in their own homes. It said to them, you may be subject to the surcharge. You now have to apply for an exemption that we have to approve and provide documentation. And if you don't, on a very short deadline, originally August 21, you'll be deemed to owe the tax. It was a blatant attempt to ensnare homeowners into having to pay a tax that doesn't apply to them. And that's directly contrary to the statute. And they never got those state tax records, which would have verified exactly who owes the tax.
Why didn't they get the state tax records?
To this day, we don't know, because fact of the matter is we went to court. I kept demanding they say whether they did, and they refused.
So I have this question. When I originally started covering the story, the governor of the state of New York said that she estimated there would be 13,000 people who might have to pay. The mayor's numbers, and he sent out letters to 17,000. So that's a big difference.
Well, even more so, Marcia, we have the former city Department of Finance Commissioner, Martha Stark, a renowned expert, who says it's really only going to be more like 5,000 or 6,000. So the Mondani administration sent those threatening notice letters, putting the burden on homeowners to prove they live in their own homes, to 3 times the number of people likely subject to the surcharge. And they sent it to 17,000. there's only 24,000 New Yorkers who live in that luxury living. So they're really saying that over 70% of New York's most valuable homes are second homes, underutilized, vacant. It's insane. But they're trying to ensnare people if you don't respond in time. That's why we went to court. And that's why a judge entered a temporary restraining order that the city can't enforce those illegal notices.
So we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But up next, state assemblyman who may have a say in whether Donald Trump gets his name on the new Penn Station. Tony Simone is the first openly gay assemblyman to represent Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen, and Midtown. And that means that you have Penn Station in your district. And there's a big redevelopment plan going on that the President of the United States is involved in, but you are against it, and I'm wondering why.
I'm not necessarily against it. I
mean, his plan you're against.
Not necessarily. I don't really call it his plan. Look, I don't care who gets credit for rebuilding Penn Station, which we must do. I just want to make sure it functions. And it's beautiful, and it serves commuters first. Look, if he can get it done and pay for it, I'm all for it.
Yeah, but you don't know that you don't think he's going to always pay for it himself, right?
I mean, let's be honest, Marcia. Was a corrupt developer, never paid his bills, never paid his workers.
But apparently $8 billion has been allocated. Is that enough?
So I think it'll be more. And look, I have full faith in Andy Byford, Train Daddy, but he's got a tough job. He's got a boss who's micromanaging him. And look, I don't care where you put the president's name, maybe by the bathroom or in the back. We'll remove it maybe one day. If the federal government wants to pay for it and the governor would be foolish not to accept their money, great. But we know it's going to be more expensive. And I don't want that to fall on New York commuters if they don't have full transparency, and they haven't.
Are you also worried about money that he could take from other developments in the area?
Well, that's exactly my point. I don't have full faith that the money he's promising will come through. So that's why me and my colleagues in the West Side, we want to see the other projects that were not accepted, the RFPs that have not been released. We want to see how they're going to pay for it. I use the example. My husband would never get our kitchen redone if he didn't see the full cost and how we're going to pay for it and what if it could be overrun. I want to see the full cost, and I want to make sure in the end it serves the commuters and my residents first.
So over the years, there have been many plans about redeveloping Penn Station, and there's been consideration about the possibility of moving Madison Square Garden. The present plan does not move Madison Square Garden, but it does eliminate the theater that's there so that they can make room for the redevelopment. Is that a good idea, a bad idea? You want to keep the garden there, or you want to move it away?
First of all, I don't think Jim Dolan's going to move the garden, but I do believe that the theater is wasted space. We could put the trucks inside. I've always said I want a grand entrance on 8th Avenue, so my
Well, this plan has a great...
And I'm for that. But like I said, I love the pretty renderings. I just want to know how we're going to pay for it. I want to make sure that it's functional, not just pretty. That you right now, people run from it. I want have people actually want to go to Penn Station and have a pleasant experience. We should have through running as well. You shouldn't have to switch several trains to go through one region.
Well, that was my next question about through running trains. Don't you have to redo the tracks at Penn Station so that you can have through running trains? Don't you? You need to explain to people what that means.
Sure. We need to expand access to the tracks. You know, it's crazy now. You have to wait the last second to know where your track is in a city like New York City. And it shouldn't be that you switch trains to go from New Jersey to New York, Connecticut several times. Europe figured this out. Other cities have figured it out. We can figure out through running where you could stay on the same train to get through New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania.
But when I had the conversation with Andy Byford about the through running trains, because, you know, people, you know, come from other places. They go to Boston, they go to Connecticut, and he said that's sort of down the line. And I'm wondering why, if you're redeveloping Penn Station, why can't it be part of the grand scheme of things?
Well, I do believe, Andy, they're studying it. And I don't want a preordained study saying just we can't do it because we think it's too expensive. I think we should have an amazing station, and we should be able to make it easier on commuters.
So if that means you have to find money from elsewhere on top of the $8 billion. Would you support that?
Sure. Hopefully the Congress turns Democrat and we find the money from what was promised from the president. And if it goes over the $8-9 billion, we find the money from the federal government. And I think the governor was smart to allow the president to take it over as long as he pays for it.
So do you think there should be also other community development like housing and gardens and other things in the area? And who would pay for that?
So I do have a vision. I've met with stakeholders that we use what we call the general project plan that the governor disabled from Penn Station. We can build a 24/7 live, work community, play community upstairs. How cool would it be? Like a Bryant Park. When we have the next time the Knicks win, you can go watch it in the park, not sit in the middle of the street. We can build middle-class housing. We have a housing crisis. We can go from 500 to 5,000 units of housing.
Where's the land for that?
Well, right now, Vornado is proposing Empire State Building like offices. We don't need that many. Scale it back and make many of those buildings housing.
So the other question I have, the hanging chad, so to speak, is if Trump wants his name on the building, how do you feel about it?
I don't care what we name it on the wall, but it will always be Penn Station. If we want to put it on a plaque. Look, usually when the federal government gives money, they put the president, the member of Congress, people who were involved with the project. We can put it on a plaque in a corner somewhere, but it will always be Penn Station.
You don't want it to be Trump Station?
Never.
Why?
Because it's not. It's New Yorker Station, not the president's station.
All right, let's switch topics. You have a lot of homeless encampments in your district. I've done stories about them. What are you going to do about it?
So right now, what we do is we move encampments. We talk to the mayor's office, and that's not the solution. Moving the unhoused and mentally ill from
they move from one place to the other. They get a 7-day...
It's not the solution.
They're told that we're going to move you in 7 days. They just go from place to place. Why?
Look, the long-term solutions aren't easy. We need more supportive housing in every district in the city. We need services. We need to pay the people who actually do the work a living wage. Most of them, it's tough work. Barely can pay their rent. We need to take this issue seriously, and we've been ignoring it. We can't just move encampments. We need to find these folks housing and services. And in some, I have a bill, MDT, it's called, multidisciplinary teams. Right now, a lot of these groups do great work, hard work. They don't talk to each other. I don't want to create more bureaucracy. I want to create efficiency. I want to know what happened to the individual that we saw on 37th and 10th.
But a lot of those people don't want to move. I've talked to them.
And then sometimes we've changed involuntary commitment laws. If you're, I don't think it's...
We have about 30 seconds left.
Look, I don't think it's progressive if someone is at harm to themselves or others. Sometimes we have to ensure that they get help. And we have to make sure they're either institutionalized, they get their medication. We have to respect that they're human beings. We can't let them live on the street the way they're living.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But our conversations continue right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. Thank you for joining me. When it comes to romance, the phrase, "I've got my eye on you," means, hey, want to get together? But in the post-9/11 world, it's come to mean security cameras. Now, how do New Yorkers feel about that? Well, they're weighing in on your point. Do you think New York City needs more security cameras?
Not in this area.
They need something.
No, not really. They just need in certain areas.
On the trains.
It's not necessary.
Some say yes, but I think it's invasion of privacy.
Yeah, sure.
Why?
For our safety, especially at nighttime when I have to go home.
There's just so many people, so much happening.
Because now it's criminal all day in the area, and people who doesn't have a place to live, they are on the street.
There's a lot more crime. There's a lot less people doing their job.
We need to be protected.
I've been living here for 20 years and haven't noticed any real crime.
I live near the river, and when it's dark out at night, certain blocks I will not walk by myself.
Do cameras make you safer?
Not really.
Sort of. Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, if the police pay attention to them.
100%. because less people would commit crimes if there's cameras on them.
People are going to do what they do.
I don't think they make you safer, but it helps you if something were to happen.
Do the cameras make you feel safer?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Yes, it makes me feel safer.
Yeah, a little bit.
It makes me feel more comfortable when I'm walking in the streets at night.
Never really thought about it. They don't really do anything for me.
Me, myself, not really.
Not really, but at least there's someone watching, at least if in a public space.
Are cameras all over the place an invasion of privacy?
I don't think so.
Sometimes.
Not my I don't care.
Not to me. Not to me. I think they're great.
It's more for your protection.
No, unless you have something to hide.
I guess with facial recognition, that's a good argument.
You know, in case of anything does happen, I mean, really does happen, there's next to have them there.
Are cameras all over the place an invasion of privacy?
I think so. As a matter of fact, I wrote my landlord, I don't want him to take pictures of me. Once upon a time, you had a right as an individual, and now it's not so much.
What should the city do to make people feel safer?
More cameras.
Have more security and police.
You have a lot more police out when I go home at night.
Get more police and just set people who is without homeless to get the place to stay.
More cops, more arrests. I'm afraid to say, but more institutions.
What should the city do to make me safer? I don't know. I feel pretty safe.
I feel like there's just a lot of cleaning up that needs to happen. If it looks trashy and nasty, it's going to feel unsafe.